Hi everyone, thank you for joining me. Something a little bit different today. I'm down in the bowels of my room because a few times I've been asked, when are you going to do a room tour? So I thought, why not? Let's give it a go. So we're going to take a look at this wall behind me. This is what you normally see behind me on my videos, and it's the bulk of my CD collection. There's a lot of my favourite box sets on here. There's a music Blu-ray and DVD collection. And then what I'm going to do is a second part to this video where we're going to flip everything round and look at that wall over there, which you don't normally see. That's where I've got all my vinyl, some of my other favourite box sets and my hi-fi setup. But that'll be part two. Part one, we're going to concentrate, just take a leisurely look through this, and it might be quite a long video, so feel free to grab yourself a drink and let's just have a tour. Okay, so starting right up in this top corner here. Now, what I've got on my first section, it's sort of my major artists really, starting with the Beatles. And up here, you'll see that I've got all my 1987 CDs. So these are really my kind of introduction to a lot of these albums. I got my first CD player in 1990 and started buying CDs then. So we've got all of the 1987 CDs there, from Please Please Me right through to the two Past Masters albums. And then we've got 1994, was it? 93 I think it might have been. We had the Beatles live at the BBC. So we've got the single, Baby It's You, that came from that, followed by the album. And then there's all the anthology singles and albums there. Yellow Submarine Songtrack, Beatles 1, Let It Be, Naked Love, live at the BBC Volumes 1 and 2 that came out quite a few years later. I am not going to go through every single CD in detail, don't worry, because that would take forever. But I'm just going to sort of, some points I might show you a bit more in depth. So let's move down now to the second row. You see that okay? Yeah, so it's more Beatles here, Live at the Hollywood Bowl album, and then some press conferences and sort of non-official stuff. This is interesting if you've never seen this. This is the Beatles tapes, the David Wigg interviews. Now these were interviews recorded with the four of them. I think it was round about the time of Abbey Road release or just after. So it's really their thoughts on where they were at with the lives and the band after they'd really sort of done the last of the work together. So it's pretty interesting if you've never heard that to give that a try if you get a chance. And then we start with my McCartney section. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of this. Now I did a separate video a few months ago where I got all of this out of the shelves and I talked through my whole McCartney section. So that's, if you want an in-depth look at that, I would suggest looking at that. I'm just going to really sort of skim through this for now. So we've just really got all the sort of studio albums here now. These will obviously only fit in regular sized CDs. So the big stuff's all over there separately. But we've got all the albums, including classical albums, live albums. Let's move down to the next row. This whole next row is McCartney again. It's live albums, it's classical albums, it's Fireman. It's singles, it's just, yeah, it's all there, basically. But we're not finished with McCartney yet. He's on the next row as well. Let's have a look at that. More sort of CD singles, and then moving forward to more recent albums. I think there might be an Egypt Station lurking in there somewhere. Where's my Egypt Station? That's interesting. Oh, it's on the row up. Forget that. These are all singles. I forget what's in here myself sometimes. We then move on to my George section. So we've got All Things Must Pass. That was the original CD release, which I never really liked. It's not the greatest sounding one. And it took me a long time to find the version that I'm finally happy with, until hopefully we get a Phil Spector remix. Not Phil Spector remix, I don't want him anywhere near it. A remix of the original album, which, could that be next year? That would be good. But the 2014 CD is my favourite one so far for All Things Must Pass. A load of George studio albums. I'll pull out an interesting one, When We Was Fab CD single, which is one of those small 3-inch singles. So that's a bit different. And I've got my Wilburys albums there with the George section. I do love myself a bit of Wilburys. Moving down, we'll have a look at the John Lennon section next. Okay, so first of all, we've got all the arty stuff, you know, your Two Virgins, wedding album, all that kind of thing. Moving through into the studio albums. Now, I have got the John Lennon signature box from a few years ago that's got all those studio albums in, but that's over on the other side of the wall, so that'll come in part 2 of the video. This is a really interesting one. If you've not heard this, I suspect many of you will have if you are Lennon fans. John and Yoko, the interview. It's really sad as this, although it's great at the same time. This was recorded on the 6th of December 1980, obviously just 2 days before he died. And this was an interview that he gave with Andy Peebles of BBC Radio. And it really sort of, he talks about his life pretty much from the moment that he met Yoko through to that particular point. And the real sad thing is saying things like, you know, you can judge me on my work when I'm dead and buried, which I hope is a long way off yet. And yeah, 6th of December 1980 he said that. So it can be a tough listen, but it's a really interesting listen, and I'm so glad that we've got that. I've also got the famous Lennon 4 CD set. This was actually my introduction to John Lennon as a solo artist. So I bought this when it first came out in 1990. It was one of my early CDs that I bought, and for years that served as my John Lennon collection. You might get a look at the track list there if you want to pause it. But nearly everything on there has since been replaced by better versions that have come along elsewhere. So, but a lot of affection for that set, because that was for years my go-to Lennon box set. We then move on to Bob Dylan. So Bob Dylan is a big love of mine. I haven't got all of his studio albums, but I think I've got the main basis covered. So you've got the early albums there from the 60s, and we'll move down to the next row and carry on with his later albums. So yeah, the latest one that I've got as a studio album is Tempest, there from a few years back. We then move on to the bootleg series. I love the bootleg series. I might do a separate video on this sometime, but I've got all of them apart from the one that I always said I wanted the most, which is the Blood on the Tracks set. I haven't bought it yet, but I hope to at some point. The big cutting edge one, the 65-66 sessions, that's over there. You can see that in the background. We'll come to that in a little bit. But yeah, there's my Dylan section. So underneath my Bob Dylan section, we're still focusing on my major artists. So the House Martins, who are one of my favourite bands of all time. We've got their albums there, followed by the sort of offshoots of that band, which was The Beautiful South, and then the recent Paul Heaton and Jackie Abbott albums. Fantastic, love that. And then the Beach Boys. So big Beach Boys fan. We've got most of their early albums there. My favourite version of Pet Sounds is the 50th anniversary one that came out in 2016. Got the big deluxe box of that, which is over on the other wall, so we'll show you later on. A few more of their albums there. And then moving down to the next row. Getting a little bit darker down here, so I might have to adjust the lighting in a minute. David Bowie. So I do like David Bowie a lot. I have huge respect for what he did. I wouldn't say I'm a massive Bowie fan, but you know, I do enjoy quite a lot of his albums, so we've got a few of them there. And that's really the end of my major artist section. We then move on to just sort of alphabetical, really, of the rest of my collection. So I'm just going to really quickly skim through these. What have we got? ABBA, Adamant, Ryan Adams, Arctic Monkeys, who might get shoved up to major artist status later at some point, we shall see. And moving down, what have we got next? Can we see that? Let's just get in a little bit closer there. Okay. So we have got some Bee Gees, we've got Blondie, Bonzo Dog Band. I love me some Bonzo Dog Band. Fantastic. Jeff Buckley, Jake Bugg, big fan of Jake. Anna Calvi, she's great. If you've never heard Anna Calvi, both the first 2 albums there, both signed. She's one of the best live guitarists I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely superb. I'd love to see her do a James Bond theme. There's a song on this album called Love Won't Be Leaving. That to me just sounds like a James Bond theme. Really, really good. So we've got some Glenn Campbell, some Johnny Cash. Okay, I've just got us a little bit of extra lighting down here because it was getting a bit dark. So what have we got? Some more Johnny Cash, Elvis Costello, The Cure. Now The Cure are one of my big big loves as well, so I should really move them up to my major artist section as well. But this, I know it's a compilation, so it's cheating a little bit, but that to me is just one of the best compilations that's ever been made. And the CD version is so much better than the vinyl version in terms of the track listing. Absolutely fantastic is that. So I've got a few Cure albums there. Dexys Midnight Runners over this side. Let's get down to the next row. Okay, so in here we've got a bit of Neil Diamond, and then, yeah, Dire Straits. So I've got all the Dire Straits albums there, well, the main studio albums anyway. Fantastic. And then another huge love of mine is Nick Drake. I imagine there's a lot of Nick Drake fans out there, some of who will be watching this, and if you've never checked out Nick Drake, he was just one of the most talented people, really. He died very young in the early 1970s, but left us with 3 absolutely perfect studio albums that I would recommend anybody of any age checks out. Absolutely superb. A few more bits and pieces there you can hopefully see, including the first CD I ever bought, which is this one here, Erasure Wild. So I bought a CD player in 1990, bought a few CDs first to encourage myself, and that was the first one I ever bought, so very special place in my heart for that. If anybody's seen my top albums of the 2000s, there was the number 1, Fleet Foxes, the debut by them. Absolutely love that album. Oh, it really is getting dark now, so let's just move this down a bit. Okay, we'll quickly skip through this. Nothing massively interesting here, but you've got Haim. I quite like Haim, they're worth checking out. Hendrix, Buddy Holly, a few Michael Jackson albums, Jamiroquai, Billy Joel. Bottom row now, and then we can get back into the light up near the top of the room, but let's have a look at this bottom row. Okay, down on this bottom row we've got some Billy Joel there, Tom Jones, Elton John, Kaiser Chiefs, Killers, Kings of Leon, The Kinks, Last Shadow Puppets, LCD Sound System, and Led Zeppelin there, right in the bottom corner. The other thing that I keep in the bottom corner, just separate, there you go, it's the Bible. Well, it is for me anyway, the Complete Beatles Chronicle by Mark Lewison. Got to keep that handy, you never quite know when you're going to need to look something up in there. Whew. Right. Let's get stood up, let's get some light on the job, and let's get back up and look at the second row. Okay, so this second tower here, we've got a few rows here which are all, this is my Britpop collection. I'm not going to go into massive detail, I might save that for another video, but essentially what you've got here is the Blue Tones, Cast, Blur, and associated Graham Coxon solo albums, Charlatans, Dodgy, Cooler Shaker, huge Cooler Shaker fan, Manic Street Preachers, and then all my Oasis CDs. So loads of Oasis albums, singles there, plenty of all that lot, and then the stuff that followed, so BDI, Noel Gallagher, Liam Solo, etc. And then completely and utterly randomly, because it just because I like it on display in the centre, Bob Dylan The Rolling Thunder Review, which I did a separate unboxing video on. Why wouldn't he sit next to Oasis? Yeah. Well, you know, you've got to have a system, haven't you? A bit more of the Britpop section, Ocean Colour Scene and Pulp, and then obviously you've got the Mike McGear album next to that. Again, why wouldn't you? Pulp, Seahorses, Stone Roses, Suede, Supergrass, and then sort of things that came a little bit after Britpop, really. Travis, Stereophonics, that kind of thing. Paul Weller, huge Paul Weller fan, so we've got his solo career here, which I've then followed up with my collection of the Jam CDs. So then that's the sort of end of that that particular section for that genre, and then we move back alphabetically after the Led Zeppelin stuff. We can see we've got the end of the Led Zeppelin stuff here. So what have we got? We've got Julian Lennon, Level 42, Madness, bit of Bob Marley, James McCartney, Don McLean. And moving down, let's see if we need any extra light on the job, or are we okay at the moment? Might get away with this one. What have we got? Some Joni Mitchell, Monty Python, New Order's a few New Order albums there, Nirvana, Pet Shop Boys, Tom Petty, and then we've got Pink Floyd. there. So a few Pink Floyd albums, not loads of them, but several there. The Police, Pretenders, and then moving down, we've got Proclaimers, Public Service Broadcasting. They are a great band. I'm going to pull out an album here, The Race for Space. Now, if you are somebody who has any interest at all in NASA and what's happened with trips to the moon and such like, I would really recommend this album. It's an album that's been made using actual NASA recordings from the moon landings and the moon missions, but they've made it into a fantastic music album. Well worth recommending is that. What else have we got here of interest? Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Ruttles. I'm wearing my Ruttles t-shirt today, and there's my Ruttles albums. And then we move on to Simon and Garfunkel. So we've got a good box set there. That's really nice. That's got all their studio albums in. And then moving down, we've got more Simon and Garfunkel, Paul Simon solo, Sigur Rós, Slade, Elliott Smith, got a few of his albums there, Patti Smith, The Smiths, Regina Spektor. I'm a big fan of Regina Spektor. She's made some great albums. And then down at the bottom, what have we got here? I think this is just sort of a little section of oddments right at the very bottom. We've got some Christmas albums here, a few compilation bits and pieces. Nothing massively exciting there. Okay, let's go back up to the top, get some light on the job. Okay, this next column, well, this is the stuff that you usually see in the background when I'm doing my videos. So there's the Pure McCartney set there, the Beatles Tune In, the Mark Lewison, absolutely monster, biggest book on the Beatles you're ever going to see, the most heavily researched books on the Beatles you're ever going to see. We're waiting for volume 2 to come out. It's going to be another few years yet, I think. Mine are both signed by Mark when I met him last year. We've got Joshua Tree set here, Concert for George. There's my Bob Dylan bootleg series volume 12 box set. That's a beauty, is that? Very nice Bob indeed. Moving down. So this is just a weird sort of collection of stuff that's all a bit bigger than everything else, and it won't fit in these sort of normal size rows that I've got. These are all a bit taller, so I've had to sort of stick them separately. So they're not really related to each other in any way, but you've got a Phil Collins box set. There's some U2, Blur, Paul Simon, Springsteen. One of my favourite albums there, Ogden's Nut Gone Flake by Small Faces. And then the Beatles in mono CD box set. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Moving down. Now normally on my videos you'll have seen the Beatles in mono vinyl box set, but I've moved it, and George is getting a run out. That's the George Harrison vinyl box set, and what a beautiful set it is as well. Okay, moving down the row below George, and we're sort of back to my major artists really. I didn't want them down at the bottom of that first row. I wanted them a bit more at head height. So we're sort of continuing with my major people here. So we've got Queen. There's a load of Queen albums there. Radiohead and REM. A lot of their stuff there. So they're all bands that I'm a big fan of. And then moving down again, major artist for me is U2. So we've got a lot of U2 stuff here. If we just go across here, it's all sort of singles and albums. And they continue into the next row down. Okay, there's the end of the U2 section. So then we actually move on to a different genre then. This is my folk section. This is something I've never talked about on this channel, but I love a bit of folk music. And I like sort of traditional 60s and 70s British folk. So Anne Briggs, Vashti Bunyan, beautiful, Fairport Convention. I'm only really interested in Fairport Convention for the period while Sandy Denny was with them. But you've got, I mean, that's just one of my favourite albums of the era there. Legion Leaf, absolutely fantastic. And then Sandy Denny left Fairport Convention and formed a band called Fotheringay. So I've got a couple of their albums there. And then some Sandy Denny solo albums. So that's stuff that I really like. And then Kate Rusby. She's somebody else who I think I've got pretty much all her albums here. She's current. She's around now. The Barnsley Nightingale, as she gets called, but she's made some beautiful stuff. I really enjoy her work. So if we're going on to the next row, we've got more Kate Rusby down here. In fact, I'm just going to pause while I get some more light on the job. That's better. So there's a few more Kate Rusby albums there. And then we sort of drop out of folk and back alphabetically through my normal artists for no obvious reason, but there you go. We've got some Bruce Springsteen. That's a good box set of all his albums up to where did it go up to? Let's have a look. Up to Born in the USA. So that's a really nice set. We've got some Stereophonics there. Rod Stewart, the Stripes, they were a good band, set of young lads from Ireland. I think they're split up now, but they were just making good old-fashioned rock and roll when they were sort of 15, 16 years old. Television debut album, that's superb. What an album that is. And then moving down into the bowels again. The Twang, I really like them. It's sort of chavvy Britpop, post-Britpop. It's like a sort of more modern version of the Happy Mondays a little bit, but not quite as funky. It's good anyway. Velvet Underground, what an album that is. I had a real trip about 10 years ago where I was listening to a lot of Rufus Wainwright and his sister Martha. So we've got some of their stuff there. And then moving along, we've got the White Stripes over here, the Who, and then we're sort of at the end alphabetically there with Neil Young Decade at the end. Okay, and that's alphabetically the end of the CDs. Bottom row, just quickly show you here. We'll actually move on to some DVDs then. All comedy stuff there. Peter Kay. I'm a massive Ricky Gervais fan, so there's a lot of his stuff there, and I've got some live DVDs elsewhere. And then, now, watchers to my channel might think that Paul McCartney is my ultimate hero, but no, Mr. Alan Gordon Partridge gets that title. He is just my favourite ever comic character. Absolute genius. Love it. So that's that one. Let's move on to the next tower. Okay, we're on the last lap now. This is the final column that we're going to look at. So we've got my Paul McCartney Archive Collection Super Deluxe Edition box sets over here. So I've got all of them. Now you probably recognise, a lot of you, that those three there are part of that box set. I haven't got them twice. That box is empty at the moment. I'm sure once the next lot come out and I need some more space, they'll get moved into there to free up some space. But they are just my absolute favourite box sets. Absolutely love this Paul McCartney Archive Collection, and there's the rest of them down on the next row there, alongside some friends. So we've got the Imagine box set from last year. That's really nice. Really enjoyed spending a lot of time with that. We've got the White Album 2018 remix big box set there from last year. Wonderful stuff. Absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to the Abbey Road one that's coming out, I think, 4 weeks' time. And there's my 2009 Beatles stereo remaster box set. Got a separate video on that coming up shortly, so stick around for that. And then moving down, we've got another section that I've never really talked about on any videos, but it's another genre that I am interested in. And this is my jazz section. So whilst I've got a lot of jazz stuff here, I must admit I'm a long way off knowing it all really well. I need to spend a lot more time with this stuff. But what have we got? We've got a Dave Brubeck collection here that's got several albums in there. So that's really nice, including Time Out on this. Yeah, Time Out, which is one of my absolute favourite jazz albums. Which probably shows what a part-time jazz fan I am, because I'm sure proper jazz fans love something a bit more heavy duty than Time Out, but it's great for me. I've then got a lot of John Coltrane albums here, so for anybody who's interested, just have a little skip through all the John Coltrane stuff that we've got there, including some of these are ones that have got several albums in, so they're pretty nice. Including, what have we got here? We've got what is probably the most absolute bonkers album in my entire collection, John Coltrane Ascension. Oh my goodness. Oh, I've tried. I really have tried. I struggle to get more than about 2 minutes through it. It's absolutely crazy. I'm sure people who know a lot more about jazz than I do will regard it as being genius, and it probably is, but it's on a bit of a higher plane than me. Miles Davis, this is a really nice box set. The original mono recordings, so we've got a lot of Miles Davis albums there that you can see that are in their original mono format. So that's really nice. A bit more Miles Davis, more jazz a bit further down, but we'll get to that in a minute because next up it's Bond, James Bond. Now I've got here every one of the official James Bond films, which poses a little bit of a problem because, as you can probably see, it's full, and it's full to perfection with every film. And I'm not including Never Say Never Again or the 1967 Casino Royale, because they're not proper Bond films, but these are the proper ones. And I've got no room left for No Time to Die when it comes out next year. I'm going to have to start second row for Bond. It's an absolute disaster. I might have to have a think about what to do there, but there's all my Bond films. I did a James Bond film ranking video. First video I ever did, actually. Production values are awful, terrible, but I enjoyed it anyway. So feel free to go and have a look at that if you wish. And then we've got some, these are all Beatles related DVDs and Blu-rays here. So we've got Beatles films, Hard Day's Night, Help, Magical Mystery Tour, Yellow Submarine. Really excited to get Let It Be in there next year. Hopefully the original version and the new Peter Jackson version. That would be ideal. Beatles Anthology, just one of the greatest things ever put onto film. Fantastic. Making of Love, 1+, the 8 Days a Week Ron Howard documentary. Now this, if you've never seen this, if you're a McCartney fan, as I'm sure many of you watching are, that is quite possibly my favourite music documentary of all time. So that was from the, this was like a sort of a Making of Flowers in the Dirt kind of documentary, plus also him in rehearsal with his new band, ready to go out on tour again. Absolutely fantastic. Macra at the Cavern Club in '99, Wingspan, another great film there. A few more Paul McCartney discs there. And including the new deluxe and Wings Rock Show. And then, oops, sorry, that camera's getting knocked about there. What have we got next? We've got some more music DVDs. Excuse me while I get my camera in position. Shocking. So we've got some Lennon stuff here, the late 80s Imagine film. From last year, Imagine Give Me Some Truth, that came out sort of alongside the Imagine box set. No Boys, a great film about the life of the young John Lennon, worth seeing if you've not seen it. George Harrison, Living in the Material World, awesome Martin Scorsese documentary. It's about 3 hours long and it's just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. The Ruttles, the great film, now worth showing you on this. If I pull this out, on the back there, that is signed by Neil Innes or Ron Nasty, and if you just bear with me a second, this was actually a ticket for the Ruttles gig that I went to see in 2004, signed on the back by Neil Innes, so that's nice. We've got some Brian Wilson live stuff, Stone Roses, Oasis, Paul Weller, U2, more Oasis. Whiplash, if you've never seen Whiplash, that's a great film about a young jazz drummer and the sort of trials and tribulations he goes through at jazz school. Wonderful film. Moving down, 2 more rows to go and then we are done. So here I've got my Kate Bush CDs. Now I'm thinking to myself as I say this, why on earth have I got Kate Bush down here stuck in a corner when she's one of my favourite musicians? I don't know. I'm going to have a think about that. I'm going to have to promote her to somewhere a little bit more accessible. We've got a few James Bond soundtrack albums here, and possibly my favourite soundtrack album of all time, The Wicker Man. It's also one of my favourite films of all time, the 1973. Not that Nicolas Cage abomination, but the original Wicker Man. Fantastic film and an amazing soundtrack album. And films that have been with me nearly all my life. The Omen trilogy. Absolutely love them, and I've got the soundtrack here. I feel a bit scared playing them sometimes because I think, you know, a big sheet of glass is going to come and chop my head off or something if I start listening to it. But when I'm brave enough, I have a listen to that and I absolutely love it. And then down at the bottom, this is the very last section now. Very last section. We're nearly done. It's more jazz. This is the rest of my jazz collection. So there's a load of Miles Davis, Bill Evans, Shelley Mann and His Men, complete live at the Black Oak. That's fun. We've got Charlie Mingus, Thelonious Monk, Oscar Peterson, and here's another one of my favourite jazz albums. Oscar Peterson, We Get Requests. It's the Oscar Peterson Trio, this one. That's a superb album. Buddy Rich, McCoy Tyner. A Christmas jazz album, Oscar Peterson and others. And then some compilations at the end there. And we've done it. We've got to the end. Wow. Goodness me. We're about done. Just quickly show you up at the top here. Just a few bits and pieces. Nothing really exciting. But we've got some the Beatles Capitol albums, box sets up here. And Paul McCartney All the Best, the US long box version. But apart from that, whew, that is my back wall. That's the majority of my CD collection. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you've got any questions about any of this lot, let me know. I'm going to do a part 2 to this video where we're going to flip it round. We're going to look at that wall there, and we're going to look through my vinyl and some of my other box sets, my hi-fi setup, etc. So I hope you'll join me for that. But for now, thank you very much. Hope to see you again. Bye-bye.